Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good break. And now we have our second speaker, who is Hollie. Hollie is someone who inspires me a lot. She's someone who has done a lot in the field of conservation. She has been into tourism and she has written a book titled Black Mamba for Breakfast. And also, she is an educator. She has mentored lots of students when it comes to conservation. And she's someone who loves traveling a lot. She has been into like lots of countries, and but then one interesting thing about her, she always remembers to go back home. She loves Africa. So let's welcome Hollie. Hollie has had an experience with lots of animals, and she'll be talking about human wildlife conflict, like in general, with examples of lots of species. Yeah. So Hollie, over to you.
So, welcome everyone. And I know that Toby and his crew have been talking about human wildlife conflict. I want you to really think about this in a broad aspect. I want you to think about all of the way that different species can conflict with humans. So what we're looking at is we're looking at communities living alongside wildlife. And we're looking at 3 different communities: pastoral, arable, urban. Those are our 3. Okay, and look at this image. Look at this lion taking goats. That's in Botswana at what we call a pumped pan. That is a man-made waterhole, important for livestock, but also important for wildlife. And you can see how easily those goats, that one goat is taken. They're not aware about predators. They don't react in the same way prey species react. That lion has a very good hunting ground there. Right. So before we go any further, let us talk about the levels and the zones of conflict. Okay, so I want you to keep with me. I'm going to speak fast, but I want you to be with me and looking and following what's on here. So we have a level 1 conflict. That's a dispute. That's to say, I've lost my crop. This elephant's come in, this baboon's come in, or a lion has taken my goat. That's livestock. What about income? Well, now because I don't have that crop to sell, I have no income. What about safety? I have to go out at night to try and stop those elephants raiding my crops. My safety is at stake. I don't have medical insurance. I don't have everything that we take for granted in a Western style world, right? This is a level 1 dispute. And this is the top of the pyramid. We have a level 2 dispute, and this is when there's an underlying conflict, where it's a reoccurring issue. It has not been satisfactorily resolved. We know that elephant is coming back every single year at those times of the month, and that's when it's coming. It is continuing, and we live with it. Then we have a level 3 conflict, and this is when it's deep-rooted. Not only is it reoccurring, but your social identity or your values are threatened. That is to say that I can no longer live a life of economic dignity. I no longer have the ability to earn the money to live a life of dignity because this conflict is ongoing. Okay, so those are your 3 levels of conflict, and I want you to keep them in your mind. So what are human-wildlife conflict zones? Well, these are areas where the human activities and the wildlife habitats overlap, right? We might build a road through a wildlife corridor. We might plant crops next to a waterhole. What happens? You have clashes between the wildlife and between the people. And that results in negative impacts, not just for people, but also for the animals, right? So it is, and all of those can either be level 1, level 2, or level 3. Okay. So let's look at the conflict aspect and look at these images that you're seeing here. So first we'll say that human-wildlife conflict exists when the needs and the behavior of the wildlife impact negatively on the goals of human beings. So what is our goal? Our goal is to grow a crop. Our goal is to travel from A to B. Now, hold on, we hit a buffalo on the road. That may kill someone in the car. But that buffalo needs to cross from one protected area to another protected area, and there happens to be a road in the way. So that behavior, wanting to move, is negatively impacting on our goals. So human-wildlife conflict in Africa, it's a significant issue. It is not a minor issue. And it affects the coexistence of both humans and wildlife. And that conflict arises when the wildlife starts to affect our ability, sadly, to make money, right? In the end, we need to make money. So you can see here in the top left, this is in Murchison Falls National Park in Uganda. Now, this is a common occurrence. You might look at that and you might go, oh my goodness, what is happening? Now, those hippos come out all the time. The people who work in that area know that the hippos are out at this certain time. They know to be careful. So although that looks like an image frozen in time, I've seen that happen with my own eyes, not once, not twice, maybe 3 or 4 times. And that's just in the times I've been up there. Bottom left, you can see a hippo that is speared. Hippos are bushmeat. They're a good quality meat. On the Zambezi, on the Zambian side, and a little bit on the Zimbabwean side, they are poached for their meat. They're going to be cranky. If that hippo is now approached by a boat, a tourism activity, going downriver, that hippo's not going to be a happy camper. Up there in the top right, you can see an elephant in the river, people with fire and probably banging saucepans trying to chase that elephant away. That elephant is a crop raider. Now, very often, and we'll get to this, the crop raiders are adult male elephants. So it is a pattern, and you need to determine the pattern. In the bottom right here is a very unfortunate incident. If I show you that incident and you say, oh my goodness, that's a dangerous lion, had to be shot. No, that lion came out of Nairobi National Park because the fence, the electrification of the fence was turned off. And all the people said, oh my God, this lion's going to kill us. It was a very famous lion called Mohawk. Kenya Wildlife Service came and shot it. There was no consideration to put it back into the protected area where it was moving across from. It's just shoot it. So that, you know, is a negative effect on all sorts of sides. Okay, what about arable communities then? Arable means crops. Who's got arable crops? Well, elephants, and we've got that same photo of the elephant being chased off. Hippos, they need to move from water up into grazing. Hippos can move 30 kilometers a night to try and find food. Now, if there's a drought, they're going to want grass, but so are people's cows going to want grass. Baboons, you can see that photo on the far right in the Waso Baboon Project, which I think, and Toby would inform us, no longer exists at the moment. But those baboons will raid stored grain. So the grain has been collected, stored, and the baboons are raiding it. Monkeys often raid crops on the ground and in storage. Think of quail birds. How many times have you heard them spraying to kill all the quail that are feasting on the crops? So this leads to significant agricultural losses. What about pastoral communities? You can see on the bottom left, and I could not find the photo that I wanted because I myself have a photo of lions feeding on a cow. These are actually the Asiatic lions. So in case you didn't know that lions also exist in India, so this is not a photo from Africa. However, this happens here. In the middle, you can see mongoose, and many of you back in the villages will have heard of mongooses eating chickens. And on the right here, this is Namibia. You can see a coalition of cheetahs that have killed a goat. So you're going to have predators like lions, like leopards, like hyenas that are going to kill livestock, but also birds of prey, eagles. They're going to kill dogs, cats, mongooses, jackals, and other small predators. They're going to kill domestic fowl. Okay, when I move on to this next slide, I want you to watch the short video in the right-hand corner. This is in Nairobi City. Are you ready? You can see a lion jumping up onto the wall there. She's come out of Arable Park. The security light motion sensors have been turned on. You can see her looking in the garden there of whoever's house. She's pausing. Lights off. She's keeping very still. And down she goes into that garden. And up she comes with their dog. And that's a Rottweiler. That's a big dog. Right? So there's urban communities that get wildlife conflict. And you've seen that lion taking a dog. Top left, you can see a crowned eagle this is in South Africa. It is a suburb of Johannesburg, where that crowned eagle has taken someone's pet dog, a Chihuahua. You can also see hyena. Now, Malawi has one of the highest rates of hyena conflict within urban areas. Often it's children, it can be drunk people walking home after dark. And so these are a threat. So this is conflict. Here in urban areas as well is an old photo of Victoria Falls, and this regularly, if you've been into Victoria or Livingston, the elephants will walk through town. And you can see there how many people have collected, and you can see how the cars are lining the road, so that can cause a conflict situation. On the right, you can see the Peninsula Baboon Program in Cape Town. There's huge baboon conflict within the Cape Town areas, which is a big problem. All right, so what about tourism and wildlife conflict? Well, this happens in areas where tourists and uneducated local residents, they feed the wildlife, and you'll see it. People feeding the baboons, the crocodiles, or the hyenas. Those are the most common. You can have it at viewpoints, car parks, public campsites. And it happens also when guides act irresponsibly and they create behavioral changes in the wildlife. So on the far left there, you can see the baboons raiding a car. That's in Cape Town. Happens quite regularly. It's very dangerous. But it happens because baboons have learned there's food, humans feed them food. It might not be you, but there are plenty that do it. In the middle there, you can see a public campsite. Now, public campsites in wilderness areas are the campsites that attract the people that may not know the etiquettes or the rules of camping. You feed the hyenas, those hyenas become dangerous. Those hyenas will go beyond their usual fear boundaries, and that's when you'll have conflict. On the far right here, you can see a lion. Now, you've probably all heard of Kevin Richardson, but this is a behavior that's not exactly condoned, but it's also not exactly, the lions are not, they can do it, right? And this is very dangerous. What you will get in some national parks is guides who want to get a tip. They will often approach elephants and allow the elephant to do what's called a mock charge, and then they get a bigger tip because the tourists feel that their lives have been saved. But this makes the elephants learn a behavior that it's okay to chase cars. Okay, so basically what we come to the end of that is to say that human wildlife conflict, it's inevitable. It's going to happen in every single community where humans and wildlife coexist. If you share the same habitat, there will be conflict. If you share the same bedroom with your sibling, you will fight. You know, this is just the way the world works. So what we need to work towards is where we can understand how we can work to have as little conflict as possible. The aim is not to get to a point where we have no conflict, because that is not probable. All right. So let's look at this then, the conflict aspect again, but let's take a human perspective. So the human perspective is basically that there's food insecurity. You take my crop, I don't have food. You kill my livestock, I'm suffering economic loss. I don't have the money to send my kids to school because I would have sold that goat to be able to get the money to pay for my, husband or wife's medical care or child to school or anything like that. So these financial losses are big, but there's safety risks, like I spoke about, and that's really important. And this conflict is basically manifesting itself. It is coming alive in scenarios where our strategies affect the free movement of animals, but also vice versa. So on the left there, you can see a crop that's been completely damaged actually by hippos. In the middle there, you can see Samburu that are looking at the tracks of a predator having come through. And the thing that we need to get to is we all need economic dignity. We need to live a life where we have enough money to be able to live freely and fairly. And conflict doesn't add to that, but we will always have conflict. So we need to get it to a level that is manageable. And one way to do that is through wildlife corridors. And this is a healthy planet perspective. And there's a lot of work in this. So if we think of, say, linear infrastructure, roads, power lines, things like that, we could have crossings over them. We could have overpasses or underpasses. The animals then are not going to be on the road. They're not going to be a danger to cars hitting them, to causing death. Connective habitat. These are uninterrupted areas of natural land that connect two or more large habitat hubs. We are in the habit in Africa and across the world of creating national parks that are not linked to each other. And that doesn't work, and that doesn't promote coexistence. So we need to work towards connective habitats, having wildlife corridors that are designated that sure you can walk through, but you cannot build on or grow crops in. And that will allow wildlife to stay away from the areas where we are living. Or you can have stepping stones. And of course, that depends on what wildlife occurs in your area, because stepping stones means the animals or the wildlife will choose the quietest time or the time when they're least likely to be interrupted to move from one habitat to the next. So they might do it between 2 and 4 in the morning, and elephants have been known to do this. They know when everyone's in bed and it's super quiet and there's only a few people around, they can move to those stepping stones of habitats to get across an urban area. So that's a healthy planet perspective. So let's think about then, why is there conflict? And first I want you to see this photo. It's a very unsettling photo because I want to look at everybody's faces. I want you to see how much smiling and prodding and let me touch that lion and let me feel that paw and let me see what's going on here. This is an incident last year where 11 lions were speared to death in one weekend. Mostly it was over 2 hours. And they were trapped inside. The community chased them in. There's live footage of this. It's very, very disturbing, right? So several factors contribute to this intensification of human-wildlife conflict across the continent. The first one is population growth. The more population there is, the more land is converted for agriculture and for building. Where does the wildlife go? Okay, what about marginal land use? That means we're pushing our urban areas, we're pushing our human activities into marginal lands, which traditionally were contact points between the wildlife to be able to move around. We used it for farming, perhaps we used it for grazing, but now we're starting to live there. There's a huge growth in livestock numbers. And when I say huge, I mean enormous, right? And not all of this is actually benefiting. You'll find many times people herding the wildlife don't own the wildlife. And it is someone who is living, you know, a family member who has done well, living in an urban area. He's paying his cousins or extended family to care for the wildlife. Prey species, if we keep going out and hunting different duikers and different antelope, right, then that lion doesn't have a choice. It doesn't have prey to go prey upon. It must go for goats or cows because that's what's available. There's also a lack of understanding about why and how carnivores prey on livestock. You'll often hear someone saying, oh, you know, the hyenas killed my livestock. And when you go and do an assessment, you realize it was stray dogs because the stray dogs are not neutered. They're not checked for diseases. They form packs and hunt. There's also the continued acceptance of killing these problem animals. Yeah, in Nairobi, right, we've got to kill him. You know, but she's in an urban area. That dog was probably barking and irritating her. She knew it was there. She was able to come and kill her. So it goes back to that why and how are carnivores preying on livestock. Competition for water points. You saw that in the very opening slide with the lion taking the goat. All animals need water, us included. And if there's competition and there's drought or there's a need for that water, conflict is going to happen at that point. There's also a lack of the understanding of social structures of predators. And I am going to come back to that. So I'm just going to leave it briefly. And then I heard Toby talking about climate change. And that is a big thing because these changing weather patterns, extreme events, exacerbate something called resource scarcity. So if you're going to be taking notes in this lecture, write down resource scarcity, because that is what is causing an increase in human-wildlife conflict. Okay, so what do we all want then? We want water, we want food, and we want shelter. And that includes a safe place to birth and to raise our young. You've seen the photo on the bottom left. That's the hippos and the cows competing for grass in the dry season. Bottom right, this is kind of the craziest thing to me ever, because this is a live webcam. If you go onto the African website, you can go and look at their webcams. This is a webcam that you can watch live if you want. And look at that hyena, obviously thirsty, obviously wants some water. Now it's fallen into the tank, can't get out because it's steep-sided and it's too deep. So whoever designed that water point had no idea of of wildlife behavior. That hyena, if you are able to watch to the end, does manage to get out. Owls, drowned hyenas, drowned leopard, right? It's crazy to build something that is basically a death sentence. Top right, you can just see a hyena with her cubs. So where are you going to go to raise or birth your cubs? So human activities and needs significantly contribute to human-wildlife conflict. Okay, so what are our needs and what are our behaviors as humans? The first one is property protection. We love marking out our property. We like to say, hey, this is my property. I'm going to go put a fence around it, or I'm going to go put a ditch around it so that nobody else can come in. This is Amboseli, Kenya. Look at this giraffe caught up in this fence. It's happening 2 or 3 times a week. Right? This is crazy. Just because we want a fence, we don't mark it properly. This is Lake Naivasha in Kenya. This is the hippo caught in a ditch. It's fallen in. It had to cross from one side. It can't get out. They had to come in with a low loader and remove it. What about electricity and transport? This is linear infrastructure, right? Power lines, roads, they pose a hazard. This exact same road, 2 years ago, we had a mother rhino and a calf killed when a truck hit them both, right? Because it was at night. So how do we make this safe? Maybe we say there's no traffic between the hours of 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. And the wildlife will learn, because also learn patterns. So you can see that they would start to use this corridor in the times when it was quiet. This is something, if you look around the power lines, South Africa is actually a lot better than a lot of other countries in Africa, but we have built unsafe electricity infrastructure. And if it's all about us, well, every time a bird is we get a power cut and someone has to come out and fix it. And money is lost. But if it's about living in a healthy ecosystem, a healthy planet approach, then we've got to make our electricity systems viable and safe to birds of prey. Look at that photo. Now that's an award-winning photo by Karine Agneer. This is in West Africa, in Ethiopia. This is hyena feeding on a rubbish dump. If we have disposal, we are going to attract wildlife into our settlements, and that's just a fact. So if anywhere in any village, in any town, you don't dispose of the rubbish, you're asking for conflict. What about use of poisons? This is a huge thing. How many of you have used rat poisons at home? And yet, if we just allowed owls and snakes to do their job, we wouldn't have vermin infestation. But all we do by using poisons is kill the wildlife. That's conflict. But the conflict doesn't lead to any goodness. We still get vermin, and yet we've lost the hundredth of vermin. So we have to continue using chemical methods. What about habitat destruction? This is an image from Kenya again. This is unnecessary, really. We've got to be able to keep habitat if we want to take the healthy planet approach. Prey reduction. This is Nigeria. And you can see all of the different species that are for sale there, just on the side of the road as you drive past, from pangolin to genet to monkey. Now, if we keep taking those out, then the predators have no prey. Therefore, they will come and prey on livestock. And if we do not keep livestock safe at night, then they're going to come and take our livestock. So predator-proof bomas are super important. Okay, so how do we then live responsibly? And I'm halfway through now, so keep with me. Well, we've got individual and government roles. And the government role, Toby spoke about compensation schemes. But sadly, these are actually often ineffective. They're plagued by corruption. And some of them I know people have been waiting 3-4 years to get their compensation. NGOs and private initiatives then step in. So they either establish their own compensation fund, or they mitigate conflicts by putting in fences or all sorts of other methods. Individual responsibility. This is super important. Stop using rodenticides at home. Improve livestock management. Have better waste disposal. This reduces the conflict. Remember I said we're never going to get to zero conflict. You can adopt non-lethal deterrence. So this is something like having, when you build a wall around your garden, leave a space of about 4 inches or 2 inches under the wall. So things like skunks, hedgehogs, porcupines can fit underneath there. Why should they be barred under your wall just because you don't want someone else to come in? Also, it's important to learn about wildlife behaviors. Why is that animal reacting or acting the way it does? If you understand the behavior, you'll be able to understand how to mitigate the risk. And the other thing that I feel very strongly about, and there's a place for any one of you that want to go into media, is being an environmentally knowledgeable journalist. Because how often have you seen it in the newspaper where they've said man-eating lions and marauding hyenas, when that's not the case whatsoever? So it's very important that we have a media that is communicating to the people fairly. Okay, now for those of you interested in conservation and behavior change, this is a whole job market in itself. There is very much the ability to go into this. Basically, sustainable coexistence, and you will have heard that term. This happens when you persistence of a behavior that continues even after the incentive has removed. So what do I mean? Let's say I say to a community, I don't want you to be poaching antelopes. So for every antelope I see alive, when I walk around, I will pay you 1,000 shillings. But the moment I leave that project and they're not getting 1,000 shillings, they go back to killing the antelope. That's not sustainable. So whenever you implement or you design a program, you have to know, I'm going to create an incentive for people to change their behavior. But when I walk away and that incentive is no longer there, that behavior change remains. That is sustainability. If you're not keeping that behavior change, your project has failed. Okay, so education and awareness. This is taking communities into wildlife areas, but also helping people to understand why healthy planet approach is important, why we need biodiversity to help where we are. We spoke about non-lethal deterrence. You can see here they've got an electric fence around the field, but there's a one-way gate. So that porcupine could not come in from the other way, but it can get out through that way in case it gets trapped in the field. Community involvement. This is Old Drakesi in the Masai Mara. It's basically saying, you are the community, this is your heritage, and you have change makers within the community who take it upon themselves to work and foster ownership and cooperation of the wildlife within their area. Sustainable livelihood. When you have communities that rely completely and utterly on their crops or their livestock, it's very difficult when something happens and an elephant takes out the whole crop. Of course they want to kill that elephant, right? But if they have an alternative, like they've put up beehives to detract the elephants from getting into their crops, and then they can sell the honey, then at least they still have an income. And we spoke about the media. So training media communicators to better understand the natural world and to understand how essential a healthy planet or One Health perspective is. And that is not to train media to pretend these things don't exist. This is a man-eater in Tanzania. This killed 40 people, right? They need to find it. So it's not pretending that these things don't exist. So we're almost done. We come to what is harmonious coexistence. And achieving this requires many different strategies, right? And they have to address the root causes of conflict, and they have to promote the sustainable practices. Remember, what is sustainable? It's when the behavior change remains even after the incentive has been removed. That is sustainable. If you don't have that, you're not sustainable. Okay, so the cohabitation or the coexistence aspect. It's about preempting, guessing certain behaviors. And to do this, you have to understand the behaviors of the animals that we're confronted with. So on the bottom right, we're confronted with predators that want to take livestock. So we need a predator-proof boma. This is a very successful design. Right, on the far left, you can see that image with Katie Bull. Now, this is conflict of diseases. How many people will tell you that if we allow our livestock to mix with the wildlife, we get diseases? And yet the monitoring they did in this and many other different programs shows that the animals that mixed most with the wildlife had the least diseases because they were building very similar defenses against them. You know, so this is understanding what we're seeing and not pretending to see something that's not there. On the top, you can see that that lady and her baby are looking at that elephant. Now, this is almost habituation. This elephant has become far too at ease with human presence. Like, yes, they might be able to chase it away if it decides to raid, but this could be, if you're not thinking at night, you go out to the toilet, elephant gets a fright, there could be a conflict. So habituation is also not a good thing. We spoke about the beehive fences. So if you can see on the far left, this is a fence that stretches around the field. Elephants hate bees, by the way. So if an elephant walks into that fence by mistake, it angers the bees. The bees will come out of the hive, attack the elephant leaves your field. Great, but you're also making money from selling honey. So that's an alternative income. Top right, now this is a very famous Hara tribe in Ethiopia that actually have a hyena as a totem. And these hyenas are encouraged into the village, they're fed. It's now become a tourism attraction. It never used to be, where you can feed the hyena from your own teeth type thing. It's pretty crazy, but it is starting to understand behaviors. Bottom right is a very famous program, flashing lights. Predators don't like flashing lights and will stay away if it's on, and it's easy to set up. Okay, so how do we avoid conflict then? Well, we can use livestock protection dogs. You can see on the bottom left there, that's an Anatolian sheepdog, often used to protect donkeys in Botswana, a predator protection. They really will attack the predator. Flashing lights we just spoke about, that's what you can see on the top left. The tourist dollar or compensation payments, again, I've been on those. It's a bit tricky. They can get quite political. NGOs can intervene and either help to reduce the conflict or work with communities to better help them understand where they're living and what's going on. You can chip or you can collar an individual. So this happens quite regularly. For example, some of our elephants herds here in Kenya that will raid crops. They have a collar that once they move outside a certain area, the warden gets a SMS on his phone saying elephants have moved into this area. He can ring up the community leaders and say elephants are about 5 kilometers away. Start chasing them away now, so they never actually reach the crops. Predator watch and the use of trackers. We spoke of the Waso Lion Project. You've got your lion guardians. This is employing community members to understand where the conflict may happen. You've got to nurture and you've got to manage your prey numbers, your natural prey numbers. Those are two different things. Nurturing, making sure what's already there continues to live. Managing might involve translocation, but it might also involve culling if there's too many prey and too few predators, i.e. your goats. Killing gates and fences we spoke about because that is with the porcupines. Predator-proof bomas we spoke about. You can have electric fences as well. Obviously, you need more money for electric fences. Labeling laws. So if you are an overall person who can say, well, this beef is coming from carnivore-friendly farmers, they are not laying down traps, then you're going to have a situation where people want to be in that market because they earn more from their meat. Therefore, the labeling laws help behavior change. Often, in order to introduce a labeling law, you need a bylaw change. And the people that work on bylaw changes, that again, students, is a whole nother job market. If you want to work in policy and bylaw changes to do with environmental sides, it's there. There's a lot of work involved. Okay, so what are the questions then that you need to ask? If you're in an area and there's conflict happening, what are you going to ask? Is there wild prey, grazing, so grass, or browsing being bushes available? Is it there? If it isn't, then why? Is it because there's too many livestock grazing or browsing? Is it because there's a drought? Is it because somebody's cleared the land? Is it because a chemical's been spilt? Why is there not prey or graze or browse available? Perhaps fences have been put up. Perhaps too many water points. I know that sounds crazy, but around a water point, if all the animals are coming, you get desertification. All the area around a water point is destroyed. So maybe you have too many water points. You need fewer water points so that the land between the water points is not destroyed. It's not overgrazed. Is there hunting? So where and when are the activities happening? When you graze your livestock, are you grazing them in the daylight hours? When you move them, are you moving them in the day or the night? Because if the predators hunt in the night, then don't move your livestock at night. Why is that livestock being targeted? Is it because by the predators? Is it because there's no prey available? Is it because they're not protected properly? Is it because they're easier to hunt? Are they slower, less aware, or not properly guarded? And do we actually understand the socio-spatial organization of the predators? And I'm going to give you a specific example here. But first, just in asking those simple questions, we can start to see the beginnings of a pattern, a behavioral pattern in us and those we're having conflict with. So let's just quickly dive into a little bit of wildlife behavior, the difference between a home range and a territory. So every animal has a home range. That's the area I'm moving about in. It's quite a large area. Within that, there can be several territories. So a leopard can have a home range, moving all sorts of areas, but within that, there are 4 or 5 leopard territories. So my home range is not permanently occupied, right? I may be in this part at one time of the year, this part another time of the year. I'll move according to the resources. Where is there water? Where is there food? Where is there prey? And the boundaries are pretty flexible and they fluctuate with that resource availability. There can be many different families within that home range. I don't defend it. I don't mark it out. It's just generally where I'm likely to be seen. But I use it for feeding, for drinking, for interacting with others of my own species, and I use it to find shelter. On the other hand, a territory, only territorial animals have a territory. It's smaller, it's within the home range, it's exclusive. So if I'm a male leopard, no other male leopard is allowed inside that territory. It's permanently occupied. I will always make sure I spend time in that territory and I will defend it. That means I will fight any other leopard that comes in there. Or if I'm a hyena, I'll fight another hyena, right? All around, there are other males waiting to take control of a territory if you're a territorial animal. These are called floater males. So let us say if you are in your village or you know someone in an area, in a rural area who says, yeah, we have this problem jackal, we're going to kill it. Great. kill that male jackal, a floater male comes straight in and takes his place because he's been waiting for that to happen. How would he normally get that territory? Is he'd compete. There would be a fight. One of them would be killed and the other one would keep the territory, or the new one would move into the territory, right? So surely it's better to not kill or poison the predator that is in that territory, but learn how it behaves and work around that behavior. Females, on the other hand, generally exist on large home ranges, and they overlap with the territories of several males. But both floaters, remember those are the males on the outside waiting for a territory, and the territory holders themselves, they can be solitary or they can form coalitions of 2 or 3 males, and that's what you often see with cheetahs. Okay, so what are the solutions then? And we've got 2 slides left. We can have holistic solutions. And this is the Healthy Planet approach, right? You look at the entire ecosystem, you look at the interdependence of all of its components, as well as the socio-economic realities of the communities involved. I'm sorry, but people come first. That's the world we live in, and that's the way it is. So ecologically, we've spoken of wildlife corridors. We can restore habitat, and we also can conserve biodiversity. So in places where it's gone, we bring it back. In places where it exists, we preserve it. Economically, we can introduce compensation schemes. They don't always work, but there's never one thing for one place. Alternative livelihoods, that means you have a source of income even if your crop is destroyed. Benefit sharing, to say that we will have one field that is properly funded, and then if people's crops failed, at least they can take food from that field. Social, community education, allow the community to make decisions about what's happening in their own area. Conflict resolution. Sadly, it doesn't matter if you're saying the human-wildlife conflict is between humans and wildlife, but what happens is humans and humans start fighting because it's not fair, right? His field got destroyed and mine didn't. Her livestock got eaten by a lion and mine didn't. So there's conflict resolution needed. Then we have adaptive management. And this is where we're continuous and we're adjusting our learning and our management practices based on the information and the changing conditions, including, is it a drought? Is it a wet year? Are there more people in the village? Is there political disruption? And this means M&E is super important. We need to do regular assessments. We need to do impact analyses and make sure we have feedback mechanisms in place. If this is working, we keep going. If it is not working, stop. And this is also leads to approach flexibility, which is responsive management. Okay, suddenly an elephant has started moving into this area. So we now need to manage this area. We need to plan for a scenario. This person's built a new granary, storing their grain. Probably someone's going to find it, be it rats or birds or elephant or baboons. So let's plan for that scenario. And then we have collaborative efforts. And collaboration among stakeholders is actually essential because you have to address the diverse and interconnected challenges of human-wildlife conflict. Your efforts need to be coordinated, your resources pooled, and solutions need to be comprehensive and effective. And now if there's another thing you're going to write down from this lecture, it is that conservation is not a win-win scenario. You are not going into stakeholder development, stakeholder meetings, hoping to come out with a win-win scenario. It doesn't happen. Conservation is a negotiation. We need partnership development. We need to partner with people who have shared goals and vision, and not everybody has that. We need to share resources. We need to work together. But ultimately, there is no win-win. It is negotiation. Capacity building. We need to train people, support people, build up knowledge exchange. I am giving you this talk because I have traveled so many places across East and Southern Africa. I have an overview. But if I had asked one person from that village in Malawi where that hyena has now killed 11 people to give you this presentation, it would have a very different point of view. So knowledge exchange is crucial. And policy and advocacy, as I have said before, is a whole area of employment, working on policy development, working with community rights. It is critical. And in the bottom here, you can see an elephant stepping right over a fence because that's what he wants to do. So thank you, everyone. And I want you to think about human-wildlife conflict and think how many places it exists and doesn't exist where you think it might. Thanks, Ella.
Thank you so much, Holly, for the nice presentation. And I have one question. So in Malawi, we had a situation where people were where we had a lot of pangolin traffic. So AP came up with a solution telling people that if you bring the pangolin, we'll give you money. So people started searching for the pangolins just to bring it back so that they get money. They get money, they go back again and get the pangolin again and give it back to them to get money. So to me, the compensation thing, like I keep debating on it. How does it work? Don't you think people sometimes try to get maybe
Oh,
to
100%,
like,
Sana. So
yeah,
I used to manage a compensation fund in Uganda, and it was up to me to do the investigation. And it's basically an investigation as to what happened. So first off, the community member has to report that that goat has been killed within 15 hours of that death happening. They cannot move the body. If they move the body, all bets are off, like no compensation's coming. Okay, so then I go to the body and I first check, do I see drag marks? Do I see human footprints? Has that body been moved or placed there? Because perhaps that animal died of natural causes, or it had, you know, it was poisoned, or it, you know, it was a sick animal and they've put it inside the zone to say, yeah, this was killed by a leopard. And they've cut a machete wound into it to pretend it was a claw. And then, you know, they want compensation. I then look at the track, because if a predator is going to kill a livestock, it's going to track. So I'll find leopard pug marks or hyena tracks, or mostly, sadly, stray dogs. It is usually village dogs that are killing most livestock in many cases. And then I look at the way the kill has been done. Leopards will have a throat hold. You know, lions will have a claw mark along the hindquarters usually. How have they ripped open the stomach? Have the intestines been put to the side? Has the contents of the gut been put to the side? That'll tell me if it's cheetah, leopard, lion, hyena. And if it's not civet, serval, all of these animals that get accused of doing things that they're not able to do. And so then I can keep a tally of this. And if I, as the assessor, am knowledgeable, then you get a lot less fake claims, because I do think compensation helps. I don't think we should rule it out. I'm seeing it being a beneficial tool, but only if it's managed correctly. And if where I was managing it was in like 10 square kilometers. So I can get in the car when someone calls me and go and check and do the assessment, right? But imagine you're assessing 200 square kilometers. That's not possible anymore.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And now we should get to the students.
Hi, Holly, I don't know if you can hear me.
I can, Cheryl, loud and clear.
How are they adapting those water points that are already put up that the hyenas were going into? Are they being destroyed? And what are the laws pertaining?
Cheryl, it's a wonderful question. In terms of laws pertaining to it, there are none. It is whether you are a responsible person or not. In terms of are they destroying those? Nope. You can go on. Africam has had their camera on that specific waterhole for maybe 5 or 6 years now. You can see many animals having problems there. A lot of farmers in agricultural areas will put a trough for their cows to feed, and they don't think that half of everything can drown in that trough. So, there needs to be an understanding or a social conscious movement to stop drownings, especially in these type of waterholes. The other thing is you get funders who are well-meaning and they say, we want to fund all the water points in this national park, but we want them to look like this. And actually looking like that is very cool, but they are actually dangerous and they kill. So we need to have a water point design that works and that doesn't drown animals, because it's one of the most frequent cases of conflict, especially on farms. Farmers are not aware of how many creatures are going to fall in there, especially in the dry season.
All right, no, thank you. And Holly, from my side, thank you for this amazing talk. The students were taking down so many notes now. I'll just run between the students.
Holly, we have another question from Gina. Gina, would you like to ask your question? Maybe you can unmute and ask it.
I can see Gina's question there about the bees. So I'm not going to go too deeply into it because there's a million different ways to do about it. And of course, they use chili fences as well and all sorts of things. So basically, elephants don't like bees, as I said. So you put the beehives into space, you put wire between the hives. If an elephant's going to try and pass between the hives, he'll shake the wire, which will shake the bees, which will make them come out because they're angry, and they'll sting the elephant, and the elephant will go away. And they do work, although the elephant learned quite quickly to be careful, but they do work and they are very successful. So I'm not going to say more about it than that because it's very dependent on where they're set up and do they work. Well, some of them work for quite a long time because the elephants have enough food to be living on and don't really need to raid the crops. But if they really, really need the crops, then they're going to learn to navigate the wires because they're very intelligent creatures. So, you know, I think that's enough for now in terms of what this lecture is covering.
Thank you so much, Holly, for the nice presentation.